Hi, do you like my new hat? It's not new, it's second-hand. I'm not buying any new clothes this year, as in brand new. I am still buying second-hand stuff. But this was actually a hand-me-up from my sister. Ages ago, she'd given it to me because she did a clear out of like her warm winter stuff, and I just said, yeah, sure, I'll take that, and put it in a box and forgot about it. And then I was doing my own clear out the other day at my parents' house to get some stuff together for clothes swap that I'm going to in May, and I found this. And originally it had like a little brim, like it was kind of trying to be like a beret meets a baker boy hat, and it did not suit me. It was gross. But then I realised it was actually just a beret with a little brim that had been added, and I cut it off, and here we are. Let me know what you think. I'm not too sure about the colour and whether it suits me. It's just off-white. I'm hoping it's white enough to suit me, if that makes sense. So, like, I don't look good in cream or ivory, but white is my friend. So yeah, I'm hoping this is just white enough to look good. Anyway, I'm gonna stop waving my hands at you so much and get on with the book reviews. So I read a whopping 12 books in March. I know, who am I? What have I done with me? The world's worst book blogger who hardly manages to read anything. I don't know. I've managed it. I just really wanted to read a lot this month, and also I've rearranged a few things, given up a few time wasters. Now when I want to procrastinate, I pick up a book, which I think is a much better habit, as I have all of this to get through. Well, not this. This is actually the one shelf that's entirely books I have read. Although at this point I have read enough books from these piles behind me to devote another entire square to books I have actually read. I moved some books around just before I put the camera on to start this video, so once I finish talking about the books I'm going to talk about in this video, I will be putting them up on that shelf. Well, the ones I'm going to keep anyway. So without any further ado, let's get on with it. The first book I finished reading in March was Giant Days by Pratt. I was really excited to read this because I love the Giant Days series, and I also love Non's writing, so I was always going to enjoy this, which I did. My partner actually read this before me because he's also a massive Giant Days fan. He made me buy this at Yelp last year because they were giving away a free reusable coffee cup when you bought this from the Waterstone shop there, and he really wanted the reusable coffee cup. So yeah, he read this a while ago, and I picked this up this month, and I did really enjoy it. I thought that it was it didn't have the same structure that you would have from an ordinary YA novel. It was kind of episodic. There wasn't like an overall plot, because like the comics, it just kind of moves from one thing to another. There are some like big arc plots, but they don't they're not necessarily signalled from the start, that you can't pick up from reading it that it's an arc plot and this is going to take a long time to resolve. So yeah, it was kind of an odd reading experience, reading a novel that was structured more like the comics, but it was really good and I would recommend it, especially if you're a Giant Days fan and you want to spend some more time with these characters. I think that if you haven't read Giant Days, I would start with the comics and sort of read this as a side dish, because I just think you get a slightly better introduction to the characters that way, although this does start with them meeting each other. I just think that they come across a lot more vividly in the comics, and yeah. So yeah, I think that that's just a little bit of better way to introduce yourself to them. But if you don't think you're that into comics, then you could start with this and go on to the comics. So yeah, it's nice to have that flexibility. The next book that I finished reading in March was Beauty Queens by Libba Bray. I didn't actually read this copy. This is a brand new unread copy. I asked for this and got it for Christmas several years ago now. I actually listened to the audiobook, which was read by the author, and I'm not generally a massive fan of books read by the author, but this was done so well. It was brilliant. I really, really enjoyed it. I have been listening to Libba Bray's Diviners series on audiobook recently, although they were rereads, so I haven't mentioned them in these wrap-ups. And I have the third one to go on to, but I haven't read that one before, so I will be talking about that in a wrap-up, although probably not in much detail because it was the third in the series. And I wanted a break, but I did want more of Libba Bray's writing, so I thought I would listen to this. It is brilliant. It is so funny and yet heartwarming. It's just a delight. It's just a delight. It deals with so many issues, and it's just hilarious. It really is. So essentially the premise of this book is that a group of beauty pageant contestants get shipwrecked on an island, and they have to try and survive, and there's also a nefarious plot organised by the company who runs the competition, and yeah, just there's so much shenanigans. I can't even begin to describe what's going on. But suffice it to say, it's an incredibly fun book, and I gave it 5 stars. It was a 5-star read, as was, segue, Freshers. So I've read Tom and Lucy's other previous two books to this, Lobsters and, oh, it's right up there, Never Evers, yes, Never Evers, which I thought brilliant, and I was really excited to see them do university life. And especially after reading Giant Days, I thought I kind of wanted more of the same, but a bit different, and oh my god, this is so funny. I enjoyed it so much. I don't think it was quite as funny as Lobsters, but I mean, Lobsters is one of the funniest books I've ever read, so, you know. But there was this one scene, and if you've read it, I'm sure you can guess what scene I'm talking about. And it's just completely ludicrous, but completely believable, and so, so funny. Oh my god. I just loved it. So Freshers is about Phoebe and Luke, who went to the same school and end up going to the same university, and they run into each other, and Phoebe's had this massive crush on Luke for years, for as long as she can remember, and yeah, he has just broken up with his girlfriend, who he was supposed to be having like a long distance relationship with, and yeah, they are just completely awkward around each other, and they make so many mistakes, and it's just brilliant, and I would highly recommend it. After that, I read Juliet's School of Possibilities by Laura Vanderkam. Now, if you've been watching my videos for a long time, you'll probably have picked up on the fact that Laura Vanderkam is my favourite non-fiction sort of personal development writer. She writes a lot of books about time management and making the most of your time. And what I really love about her writing is that it's about not just productivity, but about making sure you enjoy the time that you have on this planet. And she looks at a lot of studies and things like that, and it's really, really interesting stuff. And so when she announced that she'd written this novella, essentially, about a character who sort of discovers some of the ideas that she has in her books, I was really, really intrigued. And so I pre-ordered it, and then I forgot that I pre-ordered it and requested it on NetGalley. So yeah, I got it for NetGalley, but I did actually also pay for it. So yeah, I was really, really intrigued by this, sort of cautiously intrigued. And I have mixed feelings about it. I think that as an introduction to the author's ideas about time and how to use it and make the most of it, it works really well for people who might not want to read a non-fiction book about it. However, I felt like the main character was a bit unrelatable because she's a consultant, and it's not really clear what that means from the start. Like you pick it up later on, but as somebody who's like, well, there are consultants in all different kinds of fields, and she's just kind of a non-specific consultant, the way she's described at the start, until she actually starts talking about her work, you don't realise well, she does essentially, that she's a kind of creative consultant. And yeah, she has a lot of privileges that I think is also going to be off-putting to a lot of readers. That they're going to think, oh, how is this character's life in any way relatable to mine? You know, she gets to go on this like weekend away as part of her job, like an away day. She clearly has money. You know, it's not... I can see how this character's particular situation works really well for outlining the ideas that the author has and getting that across, but I just don't feel like a lot of people are generally going to be able to relate to the character. So I don't know. It's interesting because I think Laura Vanderkam definitely has a target audience, which isn't quite me. I think she's aiming more at like higher level business people, and I'm not a like high-flying business person at all. I find her ideas really useful. There's some stuff that just doesn't apply to me because she writes a lot about, you know, what to do if you have kids. She interviews a lot of like CEOs and company directors, and I am not a CEO or a company director, but I still find her advice really useful to apply to my life. So maybe what I kind of want here is for her to write another novella from a character, the point of view of a character who kind of has a life more like mine, more average, I guess. Oh wow, I sound like that website, My Life is Average, right now. But yeah, I guess that's what I want. I think it works fine, apart from the consultant thing being a bit vague, but I would like to see another version of it from the point of view of a more average person, because I think that you don't have to be like a super entrepreneur company director to want to make the most out of your life. And I think this is something she's well aware of in her book. She does interview a wide range of people. But yeah, that isn't something you get through this novella, because obviously it's focused around one character and her life and what she does. So yeah, that was a bit of a long review, wasn't it? Let's move on. The next book I finished reading was also non-fiction, and that was The Multi-Hyphen Method by Emma Gannon. So this is a book about being a multi-hyphenate, essentially, which is what the author calls people who like have kind of what used to be called a portfolio career. They have like multiple different things going on. Maybe they don't have like one career path. Maybe they're a freelance worker who has their fingers in lots of different pies, lots of different things that they do. Or maybe they do have a traditional job, but then they also have like a side job, a side project, something like that. And it's kind of split into this kind of a lot of, the opening chapters are all about kind of defining this, kind of looking into whether it's a recent phenomenon, like are people in different generations more likely to do it, this kind of stuff. It's kind of like selling you on the concept of being someone with a multi-hyphenate career. And for me, like, I didn't need to be sold on this. So I found those chapters like not that exciting, because I was just kind of flicking through them thinking, yeah, I know all this, get to the advice. But when I did actually get to the advice, I found it really, really good. And I think for someone who isn't so like immersed in the world of side hustle culture, as me, I think if you're kind of new to the whole concept, then I think you'll enjoy this book throughout. But yeah, for me personally, I didn't need those beginning chapters. I would have liked to just kind of skip to the advice. I also kind of wanted more info about like the financial side of things, because like issues like pensions are kind of brushed over really quickly, and I think that I've really got into over the last couple of years is personal finance forums, and blog and stuff like that. And I know that there are options for having a pension if you are self-employed. Like, she just kind of brushes it aside, saying that, you know, you need to have alternate sources of income, but you can have a pension as a self-employed person. It's a self-invested pension plan, a SIP, as abbreviated to, you know, that is a thing. And so I kind of wanted it to be a bit meatier in the finance department, if that makes sense. I would recommend this if you're interested in the topic, but you might need to supplement it with some other reading at the same time, but you'll probably, what it is, I think, is a good starting point. You can read this book and then you can find out what avenues you want to explore and read maybe specific books, articles, etc. on those topics. After that, I finished reading The Light Fantastic, which is the second book in the Discworld series, and it continues the story started in The Colour of Magic. This was a lot of fun. I don't think I liked it quite as much as The Colour of Magic because there weren't quite so many tourist jokes. I think what is great about The Colour of Magic is the tourist jokes, and it kind of slows down on those. But yeah, it was fun, although it was dwarfed by the next Discworld book that I listened to this month. But I won't talk about that now. I'll talk about that when it comes up in the order, otherwise I'll get myself all confused. The next book I finished reading was Nightingale Wood by Stella Gibbons. I actually started this months ago, but it was my workbook, and I was going through a phase of not spending that much time reading during my lunch breaks. I was writing during my lunch breaks or doing other stuff, or just skipping my lunch break because I wanted to finish something. So yeah, I've been working my way through this for ages, but oh my god, it is a delight. Now, I have to warn you that there is some racist language in this book. The N-word comes up in one conversation. It's literally like twice in one paragraph, and it's not like a sympathetic character who says these things. This is tackled by Sophie Dahl in the introduction to this book, that she says that it's unclear how Stella Gibbons thought, and that it's been left in, it hasn't been taken out because it was the time period, and I think it's good to be realistic about the time period. And I agree, but also you could have done what the book does with any of the actual swearing, like people like curse words are censored in the text, and that was the way the author wrote it, or it was edited. And you could have done that with the N-word, to be quite honest, you know, like, we would get it, you know. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't read like the author shares those views. And yeah, like I say, it's not a particularly nice character who says those things, and it is just in one paragraph, and there aren't like, it's not a book full of racism, but I mean, then again, it's a book about a load of white people, so yeah. So yeah, I kind of stuck on that, but otherwise I really, really love this. It's a retelling of Cinderella, essentially, about a it's kind of a funny, weird, twisted version of Cinderella. Yeah, because the main character is a girl who used to be a shop assistant until like one of the local gentry decided he wanted to marry her, and then she got married, and then he died, and she is asked to go and live with his family, and she finds the whole thing very weird because she doesn't like them. They don't seem to particularly like her, but she feels like now she's kind of stuck, and she doesn't have any money, and she has this whole big fantasy of falling in love with another member of the local gentry, Victor Spring, who is like the super glamorous young man who is engaged to this really beautiful socialite, and yeah, and then things kind of take a long while to happen, but it doesn't matter because there are kind of two other Cinderellas in the story. There's also Victor Spring's cousin Hetty, who just kind of hates her family and all the endless parties and all the glamour, and she wants some kind of grit and realism in her life, and she kind of wants to know more about the main Cinderella of the story, Viola, because she thinks, oh, her life must be much more interesting than mine. And then you've also got Viola's sister-in-law, Tina, who is a slightly older woman who is a slightly older woman, I think she's in her late 30s, who isn't happy either, but you know, she has tried some different things in her life and it's not worked out, and she doesn't really know what to do with herself. She just knows she's not happy, and she's got this crush on the chauffeur. And yeah, Stella Gibbons is a really strange writer. Like, her writing is amazing, and she gets people so well. The characters are really vivid, and they just seem so realistic, and she's kind of gentle but also brutal at the same time. She describes people without flinching. She shows up all their flaws. But yeah, her like plots aren't very like firm. So if you really need a firm plot in the book you're reading, then maybe she's one to miss. The next book I finished reading in March was Please Ignore Vera Dietz by A.S. King. Now, this is another book which is a bit weird. This is about a girl whose best friend died, I think the last year, and but she hadn't been best friends with him for a while. She had got to the point where she really quite hated him, and she has all these complicated guilt feelings around the fact that he died, and she also knows the real circumstances in which he died, and she hasn't told anybody. And it's kind of about her dealing with that, and also her relationship with her dad. What's really interesting is its depiction of social class, as you may have picked up from my reviews. I am obsessed with social class, and that's also, by the way, why I loved Nightingale Wood. There's so much like interesting class stuff in this. But yeah, Vera Dietz her dad's an accountant, but she like doesn't live in the lap of luxury. Like, he doesn't seem to be a high-flying he doesn't seem to be a high-flying executive type of accountant. He is kind of like I guess like a kind of down-to-earth, everyday kind of accountant. Like, clearly has been putting money away. He insists that she gets a job as soon as she's old enough to, even though she's still at school, and he wants her to basically work full-time over the holidays, and yeah, she finds it really hard and a bit mystifying. She doesn't really understand where he's coming from. Her mother left a while ago, and she doesn't have a great relationship with her either. And yeah, there's just a lot inside Vera Dietz's head, and she started drinking to try to cope with it all, which is another thing I found really interesting. The idea of like alcoholism as a coping mechanism being explored. It's a really quite gritty book, and I don't read a lot of US YA, which is as gritty as Please Ignore Vera Dietz is. There's some stuff in it which is really hard going. The only thing that really bothered me is that Vera doesn't really have any female friends, and the main antagonist in the story is another girl who is kind of depicted as being promiscuous and needy, and it's just kind of the kind of character who's a bit tired now, and I don't know if it's because this book isn't... Yeah, I mean, it was published in 2011, and I think nowadays, like, if you wrote a book in which the antagonist is a promiscuous, bitchy girl who's mean to other girls, then I think you would kind of get more reviewers pointing out that this isn't a great stereotype you're putting about. But I mean, it just caught me short a few times. Like, the book is, I have always really thought that the book tackled a lot of serious stuff very well, but I feel that this character wasn't done particularly well because she was completely unsympathetic. You never really got to imagine life from her point of view. The main character never really wondered whether there was something that was driving her to act this way, etc. So yeah, that's just one thing that stuck out to me. But otherwise, I thought that it dealt with class in a really interesting way, because Vera's kind of at a higher class because her dad's an accountant, but everybody she encounters is kind of like of the same lower class, people who have to get jobs when they're at school, who work at the pizza place, who, yeah, it's it's really, really interesting, and I would like to discuss this with people. So if you have read it, let me know and let's talk about Please Ignore Vera Dietz. Next up, we've got another couple of audiobooks. The first is Jinx by Meg Cabot. It's about a girl called Jean who moves to New York because of all this stuff that went down while she was at her hometown, and there she encounters her cousin who she hasn't seen in a while, but it's totally not what she expects. She's now become a bit of a mean girl, party girl, and this is another book where you're like, the mean girl, party girl character doesn't entirely make sense. Like, you kind of want to know a little bit more about why she does the things she does. But other than that, you know, this is fun. It was a Meg Cabot book. It's nowhere up to the standards of Princess Diaries, but it was a fun read and I enjoyed it, and I'll continue to read books by Meg Cabot. Next up, I listened to Whose Body by Dorothy L. Sayers. This is the first in the Lord Peter Wimsey series. I have read these books a bit out of order because I had to read The Unpleasantness at the Bologna Club for uni. This was a long time ago. This is more than 10 years ago now that I read that. So I will be reading it again because I don't remember anything about it other than that I really, really enjoyed it. And I did really, really enjoy Whose Body. It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek 1930s detective story. So, the whole plot of this book is that a body mysteriously appears in a bath in this man's flat, and no one knows who it is. First they think it's this one guy, but then it turns out it's not that guy, it's somebody else, and they need to then find out what happened to the guy they thought it was, but also where this body came from, whose it is, are the two cases in any way connected. And the detective on this case is Lord Peter Wimsey, who is an aristocrat who just kind of is bored, is really into solving mysteries, kind of fancies himself as a bit of a detective. And so he sets out to try to solve the case, to help his friend who works at Scotland Yard sort it out. And it's very tongue-in-cheek, and I really, really enjoyed it. We'll be carrying on with this series. However, 1930s racism strikes again because I don't know. I mean, as a white person who isn't Jewish, I don't think that I can accurately define and say whether something is or isn't anti-Semitic. And having looked at reviews, I can see that opinions do vary greatly. So some stereotypes about Jews are brought up and are discussed. However, the character who expresses most of these points of view is Lord Peter Wimsey's mother, who is kind of, the way she comes across is like she's a bit ditzy and that she just kind of runs her mouth off and will chat about things even if she isn't an expert in them, and that Lord Peter is just kind of like rolls his eyes and doesn't take any of it seriously. So she doesn't really, she just kind of seems a bit clueless, you know. She kind of explains some stereotypes and some ideas that she's picked up from somewhere, but we're not supposed to think that these ideas are accurate. We are supposed to see that she's just kind of a aristocrat running her mouth off, basically. There are some more general comments other characters make about Jewish people, but again, people's opinions vary on whether any of this is anti-Semitic, and it's another one of these books where you don't know what the author's point of view is. You don't know whether they're just kind of showing how people felt at the time and how people thought. And in Whose Body, the way I read it was that it was kind of making fun of people who have these points of views, and that, you know, it is a kind of a group of posh people saying these things whilst also at the same time being utterly ridiculous themselves. So from my point of view, I didn't take any of it seriously, but I can see that some reviewers have and other reviewers haven't. And yeah, it's complex and interesting to think about, and it's not going to put me off reading the rest of the series, but I am going to be really looking out for these types of things. as they come up, so I can kind of interrogate them in my own mind and see what I think about them. You may have noticed that I really like reading books set in the 20s and the 30s, and so unfortunately racism and anti-Semitism comes up quite a bit. It's also interesting when reading these books to look out for what they might be saying or alluding about gay people. Quite often they don't criticise gay people, they just kind of allude to the fact that someone might be gay and don't really say much else about it, which is interesting. So yeah, it's reading books set in a very different time and with people who are a very different social class than me, because although you're probably listening to this and thinking I sound quite posh, I am not posh. I just do vocal warm-ups before I film my videos. That's what it is. I film vocal warm-ups because otherwise my voice sounds really deep and I don't like it, and I hate editing it. But yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about it. I really like them because of the class aspect, because I always pay real attention to these stories set in upper class worlds to the servants, and that was really interesting in Whose Body as well, because there are servants and the author sympathises quite clearly quite a lot with the servants. Like Lord Peter's valet and butler, like she's clearly like on his side, and the way he talks to Lord Peter is so funny. You don't know whether he's kind of playing Lord Peter, whether he really feels the way that he claims to do to Lord Peter, but it's just brilliant and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, food for thought aside, I really enjoyed this book too. I don't know what it is about the 20s and 30s, I just find that kind of interwar period really interesting, because there's a lot of that kind of old traditional points of view, but then also a whole lot of modern points of view coming out, and I find it really interesting. The next book I finished reading was finally another print book, Birdy by Jess Vallance. Now this was really interesting to me because it reminded me so much of Little Liar by Julia Gray, which I read last year. They're both about a toxic friendship, but it goes in a very different direction in the end. So yeah, this is really interesting for me. Like Little Liar, I found it quite hard to get into at first. Like the first few chapters I kind of needed to get through before I really got into the story and warmed to the characters. But yeah, I really enjoyed this in the end. This book also had a lot of interesting stuff to say about class. It just become a bit of a book with a bit of a book. It's become a bit of a theme with the books I read in March. So the main character, her mum died when she was a baby, and she's been brought up by her gran and granddad who don't have much money. Her granddad clearly has dementia or a similar disease, and her gran is really struggling with it. Her gran has some very old-fashioned attitudes as well, and is really conscious of not having very much money. She doesn't want Frances, the main character, to accept food from other people. She goes to visit a friend and she's not supposed to eat there, or accept gifts at Christmas, that kind of thing, because she doesn't want people to know that she can't afford very much. And yeah, she has this really strange home life because of living with her grandparents, and not really having known her mother and not knowing her father. And she becomes best friends with this new girl at school, Alberta, who is very different from her. She lives with both her parents. She's never been in a real school before because she's been travelling with her parents for most of her life. She's clearly very well off. They have a big house. They have art on the walls. They have lavish Christmases, great dinners. It's a totally different world, and Alberta's parents are both very kind of modern thinking. They will let Alberta pretty much do what she wants, and it's just a totally different world to the one that Frances is from. And I found that so interesting, and yeah, because I'm just obsessed with class, what can I say? So yeah, that is really what made this book come alive for me, that element of it, and I would really recommend it if you're interested in class issues or you love toxic friendship stories, because I do. I just can't get enough of them. The final book that I finished reading in March It's such a good reading book in March. Honestly, if I read half as many good books in April, I will be delighted. I would actually also be delighted because I will be able to get some of them out of the house. Unfortunately, I read so many good books this month that I'll be keeping most of them and they will be taking up permanent space on my shelf. So it'd be good if I read some I didn't enjoy quite as much so I can move them on to other people. Anyway, the final book that I finished reading in March was another corker, and that was Equal Rites by Terry Pratchett. And it's like, now finally I've got to a part in the Discworld series. Okay, it's only 3 books in, but still, you know, I did like The Colour of Magic and The Light Fantastic. They were fun, but Equal Rites, oh my god, I raced through this. I listened to this audiobook in just a few days because I just loved it so much. I wanted to be listening to it at every spare second. It was so much fun. So Equal Rites is about a girl who is accidentally made a wizard. So wizards have to, when they're going to die, they're supposed to go pass on their powers to someone else and give them a staff. And this wizard comes to this village seeking the 8th son of the 8th son. But it turns out the 8th son of the 8th son, when he's born just before the wizard dies, is actually a daughter. So she inherits all of these powers and nobody really knows what to do with her. The witch in the village, Granny Weatherwax, doesn't really know what to do. At first she's like, oh, I'll just teach her how to be a witch. That will totally work. Girls can't be wizards. This is nonsense. But then her wizard's powers just keep developing and she just doesn't know what to do. So she's like, right, we're going to go to Unseen University, which we're already familiar with from the first 2 books in the Discworld series, and get them to enroll her. Yeah, it's all going to be great. And nothing goes to plan. Nothing goes the way anybody thought it would be. It is so funny. I loved it so much. I just kept laughing out loud, having to wind it back because the sound of my laughter had blocked out the next part of the story. It was just brilliant, and I am really excited to continue reading more books in the Discworld series, which I was anyway, because I knew good things were coming, having read the Tiffany Aching books. But yeah, I just adored this so much. So that's the end of my epic March reading wrap up. Thank you very much for watching. Please let me know in the comments if you read any of these books and what you thought of them. If you have any books that you'd like to recommend me, books set in the 20s or 30s, books that deal with class issues especially. Let me know if you plan on reading any of these books as well, if you want to know anything more about them, if you think there's something I might have missed out. Please subscribe if you'd like to see more from me. Give this video a thumbs up. If you check out my description, you'll find a link to my free e-course, Ignite Your Passion for Reading, Fall in Love with Books, which is for anybody who wants to read more or who doesn't read very much at the moment but would kind of like to figure out what books they might be into. You can share the link with anybody. It's completely free. Thank you again. You'll see me soon. Bye.